everyone, welcome back to JP's Budget Collecting and our weekly look back at the hot comics from 6 months ago. This week we're looking back at the hot comics from September 25th, 2020, and I'm recording this on March 25th, 2021. As always, we're looking back at these comics to try to understand what made them hot 6 months ago, what factors played a role in them jumping on the list, people chasing them at that time, and what they've done since to see if they've stayed hot, if they've fallen back, and what factors played a role in that. So we all make a little better decisions in which comics we chase and which ones we are just patient on. As always, we're also looking back at the Comic Tom Key Collector Hottest Trending Comics of the Week and the CBSI Hot Top 10. This week, there were no duplicates on the two lists, so we actually have 20 comics to get through. So we're going to try to get through them. So here we go. First up, we had one video game related comic, and that was Cyberpunk 2077 Trauma Team #1. And that was basically, comic came out, the game was coming, everyone was excited for it. Caused this book to jump up to $15 to $20 at release. Now it's a $5 to $10 book, 9.8. It will go cost you anywhere from $50 to $100, so pretty wide range on a 9.8. And really, the game has been pretty well received, but it also had some issues depending on what platform you played it on. So I think that also kind of sucked it back. Plus, a comic related to a game, these tend not to do that well unless there's some other kind of media coming also with the game. Next, we have, what do we got? 3 hot indies that we're talking about this week. First up, we have The Autumnal #1. And this was the hot indie of the week. Another hot indie released that week. It was $20 to $25 at release. And this one didn't maintain any of the momentum. It's back down to a $5 to $10 book. A 9.8 only had one sale, went for $40. Just, the series wasn't able to maintain that momentum, keep people interested, so it just hasn't held value, which is pretty typical on the indies. More of them follow this path than not. Our next hot indie is Stillwater #1. This was a little different because it didn't hit the list the week of release. It was in week 2 when people tried to go back and get it that it suddenly started moving. So it was kind of based on word of mouth, which led me to believe that it might have a little better luck, a little better chance of continuing to hold value. Plus, it had only jumped up to a $10 to $15 book. Now it's still a $5 to $15 book. You can get it for cover, but it also occasionally goes for 15-ish. 9.8s are still in that $40 to $60 range. So it's kind of really pretty much in the same place as The Autumnal. It just didn't go as high. So it hasn't dropped back as far. Last but not least of our hot indies is Hero Trade #1, The Ash Can from Bad Idea. The second week in a row it hit the list, second week after it released. We talked about this week, that this book was still going crazy. Last week when it hit the list, they were talking about it like $250, $260 for a raw copy. By week 2, it was up to $500 plus. Now it's a $900 book for a raw copy. 9.8s are going for around $1,500. So this has been straight cash. These weird kind of release that Bad Idea has been doing, collectors have been eating it up and have been jumping all over these books. Next, we're going to move into covers. We got 3 covers to talk about this week. First up, we have Arana, Heart of the Spider #1, the Joe Quesada variant. So this was her first solo title. We talked about her first appearance last week in Amazing Fantasy #1. This is Anya Corazon. She eventually becomes Spider-Girl. So this cover, there was a little bit of buzz about her and the Spider-Verse and that kind of stuff. So this cover jumped up to a $70 to $80 cover. Raw copies now are down to $25 to $50, 9.8. There's only been one recent sale. It was $175. So this has definitely been an I'll be back. I think a Spider character that may eventually come to some form, but there's a lot of them probably in line before her. So maybe now is a good time. We talked about last week with her first appearance. Now might be a little better time to look into getting some of these books related to this character because there's not as much buzz around her at the moment. Next, we have Mega Man Fully Charged #1, the second print 1 in 25 variant. Basically, this hit the list because it was kind of a cool Mega Man cover. It was super limited in number. I mean, how many people ordered 25 copies of a second print of a Mega Man book? Not very many. So back then, this thing was going for $50 to $60 right after release. And I'll admit, being sucked in, thinking, oh, this is rare, there's a Mega Man fandom, this one's probably going to keep going up. No, I was wrong. This one has dropped back a little bit. It's down to a $30 to $45 book, so it hasn't crashed. But it was not the straight cash book that I thought it might be just because of fandom. Even though this is pretty rare, still enough of them, not enough interest to really keep any kind of momentum going with this book. Our last cover is Spider-Man Noir number 4, and this is the Declan Shalvey 1 in 25. You'll remember about a month ago, we had the 1 in 25 of number 3 hit this list. Basically, people were jumping on this one as well. Raw copies right out the gate were going for double cover. And now it's back, or double ratio, excuse me, at $50. And now it's back down to basically on ratio, which is actually pretty good for a 1 in 25 to be going at ratio 6 months later. And this is also pretty typical. Semi-hot 1 in 25s, they come out, they'll jump up to about double ratio, and then they'll fall back and they'll sit about ratio. This is a very typical pattern for a 1 in 25. Unless it's just the uber hot one that just keeps going. But usually, if it's going to do that, it jumps higher than double ratio at initial release. Next, we have Marvel Knights Spider-Man number 10. This is our first Comic Buzz, our only really Comic Buzz book this week. And this is the first appearance of Matt Gargan as Venom. And raw copies of this were going for $25 to $40 and are all the way down to a $5 to $10 book. The reason this hit the list was we got the reveal that Virus was actually Matt Gargan. And so people started jumping on, well, the first time he was a symbiote. But I don't get what the spec was there. There was no real spec there. This had Trap written all over it. It turned out to even be worse than that at $5 to $10 now and people were paying $40. Just wasn't a lot of value here at any point, and this one didn't make a lot of sense to me at the time. And it turned out to be true. Next, we're going to jump into a little DC movie / TV news, and this is Peacemaker number 1, the third appearance of Peacemaker, his first solo title from Charlton Comics, and this came with the announcement that they were making a Peacemaker TV show for HBO with John Cena. Today they actually dropped the Suicide Squad trailer, which he factored in quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe some of this changes, even by the time you watch this. But when I looked at values yesterday, last night when I was putting this together, raw copies had been going for $150 back then. They were still going $100 to $200. So this has actually been pretty steady. A 7.0 was the only recent fairly high grade slab sale, and it was went for just under $400. So this had been a pretty steady book over the last 6 months. Definitely an interest in this book. Hard to get this book in a really high grade. I don't know what a really high grade would go for, just because there are just not many of them out there. We'll see if there's actually a jump with the trailer coming out. But I'm recording this before, I did my values before, and I'm recording this immediately after the trailer came out. So next we have more TV related stuff, and this is The Boys number 24. And basically this hit the list because The Boys was a super popular series. People were specking on where it was going to go. We knew it was getting a season 3 for sure, and was already talking about season 4. This is the first team appearance of Gee Whiz, and there's several characters that also are part of that team that make their first appearance here. So people were just specking on Boys characters, and this jumped up to a $30 to $40 book during the kind of finale run of season 1 as those final episodes were coming out. Raw copies now are down to $15 to $30, so this is definitely was turned into an I'll be back. We'll see if any of these characters come to The Boys. We'll see if The Boys can maintain momentum come season 3. All right, with that, we're going to move into the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books were all related to the drop of the WandaVision trailer 6 months ago. Now, so thinking about that, they dropped the trailer. We're all, 3 weeks, we're not quite a month away from the finale of WandaVision, so the show has happened since, so you'll see what was going on, people were specking on. what came true, what didn't, what was a good bet. So this is kind of a good way to think about this, or good timing, I would say. First up, we have Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 16, first appearance of Monica Rambeau as in comics. Yeah, she made a trailer appearance. We knew she was coming even before that, but she appeared in the trailer. Let's call it raw copies should jump up to around $80. 9.8 was hitting $400 with the trailer. Well, she was a part of the show. People really enjoyed the character. She was a big part of the show, really. And now raw copies are going for $60 to $150. 9.8 have hit $1,000. This has been straight cash. We'll see if this book falls back between now and when we see her again. I think there's a decent chance that it settles a little bit between now and when she comes back in either Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel 2. So the longer we go without seeing her, maybe this book will settle a little bit, but definitely right now in the follow-up to the show, there's a ton of buzz around this character and this book. Next, we have another book related to her. It's Avengers Unplugged number 5. Her first appearance is Photon. The one thing we didn't get in the show was a character name, so it'll be interesting to see if they do ultimately go with Photon. That's people's betting favorite because that was her mom's call sign in Captain Marvel. And back then, this jumped up to a $30 book. It was going for 30 plus. 9.8 was hitting 175. This book has also continued to go up because of the success of the show and her in it. It's now a $40 to $75 book raw. 9.8s are going for $300, although that was just one sale. Not a lot of slabs of this yet out there floating around. So another one that's went up and that I kind of predicted, given that we knew she was in the show, and has continued to go up. Next, we have Vision number 1, the first appearance of Viv Vision. And this was based on, there was a lot of spec on where they were going to go. In the trailer, we saw cribs. So we knew there were some sort of babies, but we didn't know what version they were going to go with. So people were kind of betting on Viv as maybe being one of the characters. We'll get to the other side of that bet here in a minute. Back then, raw copies were going for $60. 9.8 was hitting 200 plus. This book has been pretty steady. It's a little down for a raw copy at $30 to $50. So the raw copies have fallen back. The 9.8s have actually crept up to $250 to $350. This didn't happen. I don't think, but I think people still think there's a possibility with the whole White Vision going off on his own that maybe he'll ultimately try to redo this at some point. We'll see. So I think this is a good spec on being I'll be back. I have the feeling there's going to be a while before we see Viv and that there'll be time to maybe jump on this book, but we'll see. Everything, the market right now, everything's going up. So maybe not. Next we have Osborn number 1. This is the first appearance of Toxie, who was kind of a dark Scarlet Witch character that was part of the, I think Norman Osborn's Avenger, kind of Dark Avengers or whatever. Anyway, there was an Easter egg in the trailer with the newspaper. If you read the newspaper, it said there was a baby born named June, which is the name of this character's actual name. And people started buying this book for $5 to $10. 9.8 went for $50. There was like 1,000% increase in sales. It's now a $5 to $15 book, so it's basically the same. I call it a trap just because I thought it was super unlikely anything would happen here. It didn't, but it's still just a $5 to $10, $15 book, so it really didn't change much in the value, just not many sales right now. Next, we have Thor, number 134, first appearance of a High Evolutionary. People have been speculating on that this is a character that might come to the MCU at some point as a villain anyway. And this hit the list, though, because there was a photo of a cow in the background. And basically, that cow represents Bova, who was a kind of an Easter egg for Bova, who was kind of the nursemaid to Scarlet Witch's kid, the twins, back in the day, and she was created by the High Evolutionary. This was a stretch from the beginning, but this was already a pretty good book. Like I said, back then, raw copies were going for around $300. Raw now are basically $50 to $150, so they've dropped back considerably. A 6.5, though, was still running at $300, and I'm sure a really high-grade raw copy would probably still push beyond that $150. But this is definitely an I'll be back, and definitely you're specking on the High Evolutionary. I think it'll come, but it just wasn't a good spec for WandaVision. Next, we have another character that did show up. We have Fantastic Four number 94, first appearance of Agatha Harkness, and this was, everyone was betting from the moment we saw Catherine Hahn's character in the trailer that Agnes was going to be Agatha Harkness. That did come true. Spoilers, sorry. And this book was going for $125 back then. 9.8 were hitting 400. Now this book has went up. I thought there, maybe you'd have time, and I think you did have a little bit of a window between where it got a little lower between the list and when the show came out. But now that she's been in the show, high grade raw copies now are $200 to $400. Mid grades are $80 to $150. An 8.5 recently went for $425. There hasn't been any recent 9.8 sales. That's why I don't. So I just put what grade was equivalent in price now to what a 9.8 was then. And that was an 8.5. So yeah, this has been a straight cash book. We'll see how this does going forward. How long it is before we see Agatha again. My guess is we'll probably see her in a year from now in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. But we'll see. And our last book related to Vision and the Scarlet, or WandaVision, in the trailer is Vision and the Scarlet Witch number 12, the first appearance of the twins, that eventually, of course, become Speed and Wiccan, Billy and Tommy. And yes, the babies in the trailer did turn out to be these characters. This was a $20 book raw. 9.8s were going for $200 back then. Now it's a $40 to $80 book. 9.8s are hitting $450. This did come true, but they also, like in the comics, disappeared. But in the comics, they eventually came back. We heard their voices at the end of WandaVision. More spoilers, sorry. So my guess is they'll be back at some point in the MCU. They're not going to just introduce these characters and then be done with them. I'd be very much surprised if that happened. All right, so we're through all the WandaVision books and related to the trailer, and we have 3 other books kind of related to MCU, and two MCU and 1 gaming kind of thing. First up, we have Miss Marvel, number 13, the first appearance of Cameron, and this had everything to do with a casting call that fit the description of this potential character, who's kind of an antagonist villain, as they started filming the Miss Marvel show. Back then, raw copies were going for 10 to 15, and 9.8 hit 80. Oh, this one's kind of falling back. There was a huge increase in sales. This one's falling back a little bit too. Now it's a 5 to 15, so covered a $15 book. 9.8s have dropped down to $40, $50. So this is definitely becoming I'll be back. We'll see if this character actually shows up, and if they're important enough that the book spikes later. Next, we have Savage She-Hulk, number 1, and this had to do with rumors coming out that She-Hulk had been cast, and it was, I'm going to mess up her name. I'm just going to, anyway, Tatiana Maslany? I think I butchered her name. Anyway, the rumors were she'd been cast. They then denied them later, and then only to find out that they were actually true. They just weren't ready to announce it yet. She is going to be She-Hulk, but that's what caused the book to hit the list back then. Raw copies were going for up to 100, were averaging around 130, 9.8 were hitting 700. Raw copies are probably still kind of averaging around 130. They're going 80 to 200 depending on grade. But 9.8s are all the way up to $1,200. So this one has definitely been up. Recently, a newsstand 9.8 actually went for $2,000, which was significantly different than what most of the 9.8s are going for. I will remind everyone, harder to get a 9.8 of a newsstand just because of the way they were taken care of. But there's also way more newsstands from a book from 1980 when this book was released than there are direct editions. So there's lots more newsstands out there. They may be harder to get in a 9.8, but not sure this is a book that I would, from this time period, I would not be focusing on newsstand as being a higher priority, at least for me, because I don't think they're not actually any rarer. There are actually more of them. So, and then our last book is Tomb of Dracula, number 10, first appearance of Blade. And this actually hit the list, not because we knew Blade was coming to the MCU, that there was a movie, that they'd cast him, none of this, but because he showed up in Fortnite. At least that's why they said they put him on the list. This is a monster book. Anyway, Blade's a huge character. Everybody's been speccing on this character in this book, and just, this is a big Bronze Age key. 9.8 back then went for 11,500. 96 was going for 4,400. 92 going for 2,400. Now 98 only sale since that sale actually that's recorded on Go Collect was for 12,000, and that was fairly recent, so still in that kind of same range. 96 though jumped all the way up to 6,200 in its most recent sale. I couldn't find a recent 9.2 sale that was relevant, but raw copy, like a near mint raw copy, went for almost $2,000. Your average mid-grade raw copies are going for $400 to $600. So this is a straight cash book. Monster book, Tomb of Dracula, number 10. So yeah, we had a ton of books this week. We had 20 different books, a ton of stuff related to WandaVision, and other MCU stuff. We had some indies and stuff there at the beginning, two of which have done what's pretty typical. One has continued to go up just because it's so limited, that Bad Idea book. So that's this week's list. I want to thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next time.